Now, we're getting down to the wire when it comes to balancing the budget. If Congress doesn't come to an agreement, we'll be heading over the fiscal cliff in about less than 7 weeks. Now, the impact, if an agreement is not reached, according to the Congressional Budget Office, would be a recession. Now, tonight we're joined by Paul Lountzis, founder of Lountzis Asset Management, who managed customized portfolios serving high net worth individuals, institution, and retirement plans. So, thank you for joining us, Paul. You know, we've definitely seen a pullback in the market. This is since Obama won re-election. Does this have to do with concerns about his policy, tax policy going forward? Is that why investors are gun-shy right now?
I think the tax policy, the uncertainties for President Obama relate to President Obama's policies on a number of fronts, not just taxes. Regulation of banking, financial services, what's going to happen to the energy industry with regard to coal, the pipeline. So there's a multitude of factors that aren't really being addressed, and those all come together and coalesce in huge uncertainty. Okay,
and in terms of the fiscal cliff, we've been hearing from numerous people telling us the situation will be dire if we actually go over the cliff. We'll see a huge spike in unemployment, head back into recession. Both parties know the stakes are really high. At this point, we've been hearing rhetoric from both sides. Sometimes they seem to be willing to compromise. At the same time, today, Obama is saying, absolutely, there's going to have to be a tax hike, not just an increase in revenue, but an actual tax hike on America's wealthier. Do you think that we're going to get to an agreement? What are the odds right now?
This is a tough analysis. My hope is that we will come to a compromise. We need a compromise. We need some real leadership for everybody to come together. It's one of those, you prepare for the worst and you hope for the best. It reminds me of the Democrats and Republicans being in a boat, and there's a hole in the boat, and the boat's sinking, and they're arguing over who's going to close and plug the hole, when we should be arguing about working together and trying to resolve some of these big challenges that our country faces.
Okay, and what do you think is the most important piece of the puzzle that needs to be clarified and needs to be agreed upon to really fight the deficit?
I think the Republicans have to recognize that we need additional revenues. There's a multitude of ways those can be generated, partly raising taxes from a capital gains could go from 15 to ordinary income instead of just to 20. Taxing the wealthier is another one. You could reduce deductions. You could cap itemized deductions. There's a multitude of ways to increase revenue. And I think the Democrats also have to recognize that our entitlements, particularly Social Security, which is over $700 billion, and Medicare and Medicaid, which is over $700 billion, and about 70% of that is federal. Those entitlements, there are ways that we could make it that current enrollees are not that impacted, but in the future we could make changes to help what's going on.
Okay, so I think we all know what needs to be done. Do you think that perhaps Obama will actually make a significant step towards cutting back on some of those entitlements? Where does he stand on that in your perspective right now?
I think President Obama is looking to try and do something that's going to impact his legacy. I don't think he wants to be known. This is a huge issue, and it's a real inflection point for our country. The fiscal cliff and all the specifics are one component, but it's a huge, huge step. And the uncertainty out there that plagues our economy, if we could make a positive forward step and get an agreement in place that will be implemented slowly because our economy is not prepared for a full reduction of the deficit from 1.1 trillion to 500-600 billion in one fell swoop.
Okay.
So my hope is that we'll come to some kind of an agreement that will be implemented, and everybody has to give.
Right. Well, this would be good for his legacy if he can actually get a deal to go through.
It would be terrific.
Quickly, we need to talk about the corporate tax rate. It is the highest among the industrialized nations,
Correct.
At 35%. Do you think there's the will there to lower that tax rate? Will it have really an impact in keeping more jobs here in the U.S.?
Corporate taxes represent a very small portion. I think I'm right on this, 8 or 9% of revenues. It's not that big of a deal. We need to figure out ways to invest and get people. We need to remove the uncertainty that's permeating the economic community and businesses so that we can talk about growth and growing GDP. That's another issue. And I think if we could come to some compromise, it'll instill more confidence in people making those decisions, and all the cash that's on the balance sheet, a portion of that might start being spent.
Going into hiring, hopefully. That's
exactly.
what we need desperately.
Exactly.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
That was Paul Lountzis, founder of Lountzis Asset Management.